All right, let's talk about hearing. So we're on this unit, sensation and perception. Talk how there's 5 senses and then an extra 2 that I'll tell you later. Done vision, and now we're going to talk about hearing and how does our hearing work. Well, hearing actually kind of has some similar parts as sight. So we talked about sight being waves, right, coming through your eyes. So here now we're also going to talk about waves coming through your ears. So I would love for you to be able to compare light waves and sound waves and how they're similar and different. Okay, so remember what's the length of a wave, right? We call that a wavelength. So do you remember with sight, wavelength has to do with, has to do with color. Okay, one more quiz here. Think to yourself for a second. The longer the wavelength, what color we got? Red. So the shorter ones are blue, right? Okay, now we're going here with sound though. With sound, wavelength is going to be called frequency. It's actually, those two are used kind of at the same meaning here. But how frequent the wave comes. Is it a slow frequency or is it a high frequency? Okay, and so here if we talk about high frequency or really quick, kind of shorter wavelength, this has to do with pitch. So what do you think here? I bet you can do this. If we talk about really fast wavelength or frequency, do you think it's going to be a higher pitch or lower pitch? So the faster the frequency, the higher the pitch. So that's why if you ever seen like really slow frequencies, I don't know where you would have seen that, but those are the lower pitch. Oh, let me give me my bass. That's the lowest I can go. Can you beat that? Okay, great. All right, so that's wavelength, and then remember what the other one's called? The height of the wave is called amplitude. And so, okay, remind me real quick. Amplitude with vision, with light. So how high the wave is has to do with how bright the color is, right? It could be, here's one pink. Oh, look, this is pink. Look, which one has more amplitude? This guy, right? Okay, so that is light waves. Now let's talk about sound. Amplitude is known as intensity, which is just kind of a fancy way to say how loud it is. So I bet you can guess this. If it's a larger amplitude, is it going to be a quieter sound or a louder sound? Louder, right? The bass is pumping, right? Whatever. Amp, if I think amps in music, right? If a guitar has an amp, the whole purpose is for it to be louder. So just remember, the bigger the amplitude, the louder it is. The smaller the amplitude, the quieter it is. So one thing you're going to have to do is, I recommend drawing like a little box. Ready? Let's do this. Hold on. Just to be able to review this, I would draw a box like this. Give it 2 little titles. Why can't you see that? It's not great, but okay, hold on. Wavelength in one, amplitude in another, and then write sound over here and light. I'm going to take a second to review like that. Can you see that? Which way did I go here? Why is it so blurry? Oh man, it's not working there, is it? I don't understand that. But I've made a chart. What? Why can't you see me but then not this? Okay, you see it a little bit? Kind of? Whatever. See if you can make a chart and fill it all. That's a good way to review that. Okay. Now, we're going to watch a quick little video to talk about how, in general, sound waves work. So I'm hoping this will work for you. Okay, here we go.
You hear the gentle lap of waves, the distant cawing of a seagull, but then an annoying whine interrupts the peace, getting closer and closer and closer until, whack! You dispatch the offending mosquito and calm is restored. How did you detect that noise from afar and target its maker with such precision? The ability to recognize sounds and identify their location is possible thanks to the auditory system. That's comprised of two main parts, the ear and the brain. The ear's task is to convert sound energy into neural signals. The brain's is to receive and process the information those signals contain. To understand how that works, we can follow a sound on its journey into the ear. The source of a sound creates vibrations that travel as waves of pressure through particles in air, liquids, or solids. But our inner ear, called the cochlea, is actually filled with saltwater-like fluids. So the first problem to solve is how to convert those sound waves, wherever they're coming from, into waves in the fluid. The solution is the eardrum, or tympanic membrane, and the tiny bones of the middle ear. Those convert the large movements of the eardrum into pressure waves in the fluid of the cochlea. When sound enters the ear canal, it hits the eardrum and makes it vibrate like the head of a drum. The vibrating eardrum jerks a bone called the hammer, which hits the anvil and moves the third bone, called the stapes. Its motion pushes the fluid within the long chambers of the cochlea. Once there, the sound vibrations have finally been converted into vibrations of a fluid, and they travel like a wave from one end of the cochlea to the other. A surface called the basilar membrane runs the length of the cochlea. It's lined with hair cells that have specialized components called stereocilia, which move with the vibrations of the cochlear fluid and the basilar membrane. This movement triggers a signal that travels through the hair cell into the auditory nerve, then onward to the brain, which interprets it as a specific sound. When a sound makes the basilar membrane vibrate, not every hair cell moves, only selected ones, depending on the frequency of the sound. This comes down to some fine engineering. At one end, the basilar membrane is stiff, vibrating only in response to short wavelength, high frequency sounds. The other is more flexible, vibrating only in the presence of longer wavelength, low frequency sounds. So the noises made by the seagull and mosquito vibrate different locations on the basilar membrane, like playing different keys on a piano. But that's not all that's going on. The brain still has another important task to fulfill, identifying where a sound is coming from. For that, it compares the sounds coming into the two ears to locate the source in space. A sound from directly in front of you will reach both your ears at the same time. You'll also hear it at the same intensity in each ear. However, a low-frequency sound coming from one side will reach the near ear microseconds before the far one, and high-frequency sounds will sound more intense to the near ear because they're blocked from the far ear by your head. These strands of information reach special parts of the brainstem that analyze time and intensity differences between your ears. They send the results of their analysis up to the auditory cortex. Now the brain has all the information it needs, the patterns of activity that tell us what the sound is, and information about where it is in space. Not everyone has normal hearing. Hearing loss is the third most common chronic disease in the world. Exposure to loud noises and some drugs can kill hair cells, preventing signals from traveling from the ear to the brain. Diseases like osteosclerosis freeze the tiny bones in the ear so they no longer vibrate. And with tinnitus, the brain does strange things to make us think there's a sound when there isn't one. But when it does work, our hearing is an incredible, elegant system. Our ears enclose a fine-tuned piece of biological machinery that converts the cacophony of vibrations in the air around us into precisely tuned electrical impulses that distinguish claps, taps, sighs, and flies. Dive deeper into the complex world of your senses with...
Okay. Cool. I thought that did a good job with just visuals here as well. Okay, so we're gonna talk about, I'll kind of come back to this picture. We'll talk about in general how all that sound works. In the past, they had to know more specifics, but again, we don't have to know that this year. Okay, so you can see that the ear here is divided into 3 parts: the outer ear, the middle ear, and the inner ear. So if we really outer ear in general, why is our ear shaped like this? Do you know? It's really to help funnel sounds in. If you've ever done this, right, that actually does help you to hear more. I'm starting to get like a little bit of hearing loss, so I actually will turn my head to who's talking sometimes to help me hear. Okay, so you've got this outer ear, you've got a tunnel in here, right, the auditory canal, and then you get the eardrum. Your eardrum, has anybody ever ruptured that? Here, it's very painful. My friend did it when she was tubing. It got launched in the air and then came right down in the water, so that pressure just burst it. The eardrum can heal. It does, however, get some scar tissue usually, and then it can be harder to hear. I'm sure somebody in there has hurt their eardrum before. Okay, then you kind of go in here a little bit closer now to the middle ear, and like they said, you've got all these tiny little bones, and it's really almost like that those hammers are nailing, vibrating, and makes the next one vibrate, and makes the next one vibrate. So it's really just passing along vibrations. Those are like tiny bones. All right, and then we get to the cochlea, this little snail, and that's what's an important one to know here. Okay, so the cochlea, looks like a snail, and then down here, down below, it's almost zoomed in on it, okay? It is fluid filled. So now if you think about, if you have a cup, I wish I had a cup of, like a clear cup that you could see, right? And if there was a loud sound, really like an amp from a rock concert or something going, what would happen to that water? It would start to vibrate, right? I feel like in scary movies, I don't know, like dinosaur or earthquake movies, they show the like cups, the water starting to move. So that fluid will start to move once sound is being transferred here. And then you have all of these hair cells in the cochlea on something I need to add to this slide because they like this. Right down here, I'm trying to point to it. Basilar membrane. If you want to write basilar membrane. And really the basilar membrane is just kind of the membrane where all those hairs are. So it's just kind of where those are located. And those hair cells are so important. They are really what is picking up the vibrations and the different pitches. And it's going to now take that. So if those are the hairs here, it's now going to take that this direction through the auditory nerve. Okay. And the auditory nerve is obviously super important. And it's going to go to the temporal lobe. Okay, so that's kind of the process there. I was going to tell you another thing. Oh, let me show you this picture. So this is important, and I know it's hard to think about the future, but you have these hair cells in your ears, and they're not like taste buds that grow back, right? If you burn your taste buds, they take maybe 2 weeks and they grow back. Here, you have these hair cells, kind of one and done. You don't get another shot at them. And so what can happen if you look at these pictures, they can be damaged and then severely damaged to where you lose your hearing. And now what can damage them? Loud music, loud jobs, right? Loud noises. So like you'll see at factory workers, they wear those headphones or the earplugs. If in a band, right? Sometimes you'll see the drummer wearing them. I would just say, I know this is like sounding like an old person, be careful with how loud you listen to your music, especially now that, AirPods have gotten so good, or any kind of noise canceling. Because if you think about really the invention of AirPods, I don't know what year it was, but it was not when I was growing up. We had those like ugly little foam ones. And then eventually I think in college I had like the big ones. So AirPods are pretty new invention. And really your generation in general, we don't have you guys as an adult sample yet. So they knew that sound and loud music was bad. I mean, if you think about the history of youth, they're always listening to loud music in their cars or whatever, going to concerts. But I really think that they're going to show how bad these are for your ears once in like 40, 50 years, once this population of teenagers are adults and have lost their hearing early. Okay, I know that's lame of me to say, but my point is, like, just be careful. You only get one. You don't want to be that grandpa age 40 or age 30 that can't hear very well. Okay, that's it. I get off my soapbox. But I do wonder, like cigarettes, they allowed them at the beginning and then they realized later that they were really bad. I wonder what adjustments will be made to AirPods and headphones in general. Okay. So we're going to look at, I'll get this out of the way. Now types of hearing loss, now that I was just talking about that. And if you go back for me. You've got your outer ear, your middle ear, and your inner ear. There can basically be different types of hearing loss. Sensory neural. This is the hard one. This is the one that if there is damage or it wasn't developed correctly, this is the one that's harder to fix. But sensory neural is basically the inner ear. There's something damaged here. It could be the cochlea. It could be the nerve, auditory nerve. It could be the basilar membrane. It could be these semicircular canals that I'll talk about later. But if you have damage there, it's not developed properly, that's going to be the harder one to fix. Now, there are cochlear implants. Have you heard about those? Oh, look, there's one up here. I knew that. It's pretty crazy. I was trying to watch a video on this, and I need to do more research. But essentially, they're basically making a implant that takes the place of your cochlea. But what's pretty crazy is that they have this, if you've seen this, you can't really tell in this picture. So you have a part that goes in your ear, right? But then behind, back here, you'll have this, look, it says a transmitter right here. And what they have done is there is an internal receiver placed inside that is essentially stimulating. Do you remember what part of the brain we talked about right here? It's the temporal lobe in your auditory cortex, but it's back here. And so it goes inside. And so have you ever seen somebody with one of these implants? You'll see kind of a circle here, and then that's all put there. But I was watching this video on this audiologist, and he was basically saying this contraption is just a miracle. It's one of those crazy medical miracles that they've come up with to help people with hearing loss. I talked to Mr. Lage about his hearing device. I don't know a whole lot about it. It's not a cochlear implant like that. And he was actually saying when he was a kid, he had hearing loss. And then as he grew up, I think in college, he finally got this hearing aid. And, well, I don't remember what I was going to say about it. Oh, he just said that he knew a lot more 20 years ago when he got diagnosed with it and everything like that. The other kind of hearing loss is conductive, and that really means that something out here is causing an issue. And those tend to be a little bit more easy to deal with. I mean, this could even be something as much as like too much earwax or something in here. It could be the, what's that called again? Eardrum. All right, we talked about it. My friend who had the tubing accident. So it could come from that where she can't hear as well. But those are kind of big hearing loss types. One more thought. But in general, hearing loss over time is natural, right? And that's just part of the aging process. All right. Here we go. Now, one more kind of area they want you to know. Pitch discrimination. How does our brain, how does our ear figure out how high or how low something is? Okay, so they've got two theories, place theory and frequency theory. They both describe how pitch is determined. So one's not more right. They just kind of both talk about different parts of pitch. Okay, let's do this. Okay, so place theory, I got a picture here. basically says that we know pitch based on where the place in the cochlea is that it stimulates. Does it stimulate right here or does it stimulate back here? And our cochlea, I think it said this in the video, our cochlea basically has different parts, different hairs that react to different types of pitches depending on if it's high or low. So yeah, if you'll write that down, what place on the cochlea is stimulated determines pitch. Okay, and look at these real quick. Think about this for a second before you answer. If you have this red wave and this blue wave, which has a longer wavelength? Okay, and then remind yourself, longer wavelength means what kind of pitch? Low. So this would be a higher pitch. This is a lower pitch. Okay, so if that's play theory, frequency theory, I'll read this out and we can kind of talk about it. The rate of nerve impulses traveling up the auditory nerve matches the frequency of a tone. Okay, meaning rate, how frequent is that wave? Is it going really fast or is it going really slow? I feel like we lost my face somehow.